We have seen an outpouring of support from both sides of the aisle for former President Trump and for the rally attendee who lost their life in yesterday's attack. House Speaker Mike Johnson is vowing to conduct a congressional investigation into what happened, saying, quote, "The American people deserve to know the truth." Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saw political violence up close when her husband was attacked in their home. She said, quote, "I know firsthand that political violence of any kind has no place in our society. I thank God that former President Trump is safe." And former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived in an assassination attempt in 2011, said, quote, "Political violence is terrifying. I know. I'm holding former President Trump and all those affected by today's indefensible act of violence in my heart." CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Ed, you see standard Secret Service protections every day at the White House. What kind of protective barriers are typically there placed by the Secret Service compared to an event at a rally like yesterday?
So, Lindsay, it's important for people to remember that the Republican National Convention is classified as a special national security event, or an NSSE, National Security Special Event. Presidential inaugurations, the Super Bowl, a handful of other sporting and entertainment events across the country, and these conventions are always classified as such. So what you're seeing is, for example, this black non-scalable fencing. This is the exact kind of fencing that was around the White House for about 2 years and was up earlier or during the week last week as a precaution during the NATO summit. They put it up in the event of protests or large crowds for whatever reason wanting to come towards the White House. There was no such convening of people around the White House, but they put it up as a protection. And they put it up here as well because we're told, or we had been told ahead of last night, that this is the hotel where Donald Trump is expected to stay when he's here in Milwaukee. If that is still the case, experience would suggest that this perimeter around this hotel will probably get pushed back another block that way behind the camera to keep crowds away. It's just before 8 a.m. here in Milwaukee, so there's not large crowds out here anyway, necessarily. This is a non-residential part of downtown Milwaukee. But they anticipate, once he arrives, or they had been anticipating before he arrived, that there would be crowds potentially milling about, trying to catch a glimpse of him going to and from the Fiserv Forum, which is a few blocks away, where the Milwaukee Bucks play, which is where the convention is being held. So this is what a large-scale event like this would look like, whether it's the Super Bowl or a convention. And now we're expecting that the perimeter will be expanded over the course of today ahead of the former president's eventual arrival.
What kind of questions will be asked of the Secret Service, considering a bullet was mere inches away or even grazed the man they're supposed to protect?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of questions about whether these kinds of rallies should be held outdoors, and if so, why there weren't precautions taken for those roofs of the structures that were about 400 or so yards away and beyond, if you look at the maps and the layout of that situation. Certainly, anytime we as reporters or anyone who decides to show up for these events shows up to attend them, you go through security screening, not unlike what you go through at the airport. It might not be as rigorous because there aren't machines, but people are told, don't bring certain things in. If you do, you're going to have it taken away from you. You usually have your bags hand-checked by Secret Service or TSA agents that are deployed to do this. In the case of reporters, we have to show up hours in advance to have everything from the camera to my backpack searched for potentially dangerous materials, and it can take a while to get through those lines. We were doing it, for example, Friday night at a Detroit high school when President Biden spoke. Our teams that are there in Butler, Pennsylvania, would have done that yesterday pretty early in the day in order to get screened. So they're designed to be very protected perimeters. The problem is this guy was just beyond them. So there's going to be a lot of conversation about outdoor stuff, whether they could have caught this. Remember, we've heard for years how difficult it is for law enforcement at all levels to be tracking social media activity for these kinds of threats or signs of it. How on earth can they do that when millions of people are using them and saying things that might suggest something is up? So there'll be thorough investigations by the Secret Service itself, by the Justice Department, inevitably by congressional committees. You've heard the calls for that to happen. There'll probably be one and a pretty thorough assessment of it. But I think it's telling that the current president and all living former presidents or their offices put out statements very quickly condemning this violence and thanking the Secret Service for the protection. Because remember, this is an agency that is stretched quite broadly across the country protecting all sorts of people and all sorts of events. There was the NATO summit last week. There's the convention this week. There's a Democratic convention in Chicago in a few weeks. They've got to protect debate sites that are coming up and that have happened just recently. They have to protect presidents, vice presidents, former presidents, a future vice presidential nominee who's set to join their roster of protectees in the coming hours. There's a lot going on for that agency, and now a lot more given the investigation to come.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you.